OBG.
Hello, you wonderful person. Now, I'm doing this as a direct response to the nonsense that I consistently hear from people who fail to understand that their bold statements that they hold to be true are shaped by Western culture and Western press. No evidence, no research, simply regurgitating what they read in the rags. Now, it's clear to me that the people who shout loudest come badly armed with knowledge outside of common mainstream media reports. And this applies to knowledge of old too, due to Western hegemony, and continues to this day. Now, Western hegemony, that refers to the historical dominance of Western Europe and later United States, not just in military or economic terms, but in shaping what counts as knowledge, truth and progress. And it's not only about power over land, it's about power over meaning. And the West didn't just expand geographically, but it universalised its own way of seeing the world and presented it as neutral, objective and superior. And this process was tied closely to colonialism. Okay, I just changed my view. And as European empires spread, they didn't just extract resources, they imposed languages, institutions, and intellectual frameworks. And over time, Western categories became the baseline, and other systems of thought weren't directly erased, but they were often sidelined, reframed, or retreated as secondary. Now, the result was that many of the ideas that we now treat as standard are in fact historically specific. We do much of the same by reading Western press, and it applies to many other areas. And I'll talk about some of them. So, medicine, one body, one model. Modern medicine has achieved extraordinary things, but it's also shaped by Western assumptions about the body and disease. And the dominant biomedical medical model treats the body as a kind of machine, something that can be broken down into parts, diagnosed through measurable indicators and fixed through targeted intervention. And this approach has been highly effective in areas like surgery, infectious diseases and emergency care. However, it tends to prioritise physical over holistic standardised bodies, pharmaceutical and intervention-based treatments, and non-Western medical traditions such as Ayurveda, traditional Chinese medicine or African indigenous healing practice often take a more integrated view of the body and the mind and the environment. These systems were frequently dismissed as unscientific, even when they contained valuable insights. And only recently has there been more openness into integrating different approaches, though usually, on Western terms. Also, scientific objectivity and its limits. Science presents itself as universal, and in many ways its methods are designed to be. But institutions, priorities and interpretations within science have been shaped by Western history. Western hegemony has influenced what gets studied, who gets recognised, and how knowledge is framed. Even the idea of objectivity has been questioned. Critics argue that whatever is considered objective often reflects Western philosophical assumptions, particularly the separation between observer and the observed, and the belief that reality can be fully understood through measurement. And I'll be doing a show later on today about how we perceive reality and if there is an objective truth. You already know my answer. So what I'm saying doesn't invalidate science, but it highlights that it operates within a particular intellectual tradition rather than outside of all traditions. Also, psychology. The Western mind is the norm here. Psychology is one of the clearest examples of Western hegemony in shaping how we understand ourselves. Much of modern psychology is based on studies conducted on WEIRD, W-E-I-R-D, which stands for Western Educated, Industrialised, Rich and Democratic. I forget the author's name, I apologise. I'll try and get that in the notes. And these groups, they represent a small fraction of humanity, yet their behaviours and cognitive patterns are often treated as universal. And this has led to individualism being treated as normal, while collectivist cultures are seen as deviations. And the Western definitions of mental health are being applied globally, sometimes clashing with local understandings and diagnostic categories that may not translate well across cultures. And you don't need to ask me why I don't trust my doctors. For example, concepts like depression or anxiety exist worldwide. I'm doing a show on depression as well this week. In the next couple of days, it's Friday. But how those things are experienced and expressed can vary significantly. Now, in some cultures, distress is more likely to be described physically rather than psychologically. And we really need to take heed of this and broaden the scope. And by exporting Western models globally, psychology has sometimes misunderstood or misrepresented non-Western experiences. Philosophy. Now, this is defining what counts as thought. Western philosophy has positioned itself at the core of intellectual inquiry for the longest time, often sidelining other traditions. And the standard philosophical canon, Plato, Aristotle, Descartes, and Kant, racist, forms the backbone of most or modern academic curriculum. Now, meanwhile, rich traditions from Asia, Africa, the Middle East, and indigenous cultures have historically been marginalised or excluded. I know some people do include Muslim philosophy, but it's rare, and African, non-existent. And this has shaped the questions, the important questions, for example, the emphasis on logic, metaphysics, and individual reason, the methods, which argumentation and formal analysis, and the boundaries of philosophy itself, what counts as proper philosophy versus religion, myth, or folklore. And as a result, alternative ways of thinking, more holistic, narrative-based or spiritually integrated, have often been dismissed rather than engaged with on equal terms. That's the angry big face. Now, there has been a growing push to decolonize philosophy, meaning not to reject Western thought, but to place it alongside other traditions, rather than above them. Now, the tension isn't simply the West versus the rest, it's deeper than that. On one side, Western frameworks have produced powerful tools, scientific methods, medical advances, and analytical philosophy that have clear value, even though they're pushed onto everyone else. Let me just go on a sidetrack here. What I'm saying is, people argue, oh, you wouldn't have that if it weren't for the West, and it's like, so fucking what? If you invent something over here in your tribe, they've already got what they need in their tribe. And you may say, oh, well, they don't have like aeroplanes. They don't need aeroplanes. That's why. So you push all of your culture and inventions and discoveries and anything you think onto these people, call them savages, and then say to everyone, look what we gave you, look what we done, because people are living with your damn ideas. Now, on the other hand, the dominance of these frameworks can narrow the range of acceptable perspectives and tend to overlook alternative forms of knowledge. And they present culturally specific ideas as universal truths, and that's an issue. We shouldn't give a fuck about what an English tribe or European tribe thinks on a global scale. The issue isn't that Western approaches are wrong, it's that they've often been treated as complete, and that's what's annoying me. Now, emergent directions in which these things are emerging, I just thank God that there's a growing recognition that no single framework can fully capture the complexity of the world, including integrative medicine, cross-cultural psychology and philosophical pluralism, and interdisciplinary science. I knew I was going to get that struggled. But my point here is that it isn't only in the grand scale of things, but also in our daily lives that people put forward stupid ideas as truth because they read them in the Western press. So this hegemony is still there. And people do this while neglecting other people's views, which have strong cultural links. Now, Western hegemony has shaped not only global power, but the structures and how we understand reality in itself. Medicine, science, psychology and philosophy, as I've just said, they've been defined of norms and they've framed the key questions. But it also happens across the media now. And I'm glad that global perspectives are becoming more interconnected and that the limits of any single worldview are becoming clearer. And the challenge now is not to discard Western thought, but to recognise it as one map among many. Michael Jackson was innocent. Rest in peace, Africa Bambaataa. The truth will out. I am the OBG.
OBG.